Somewhere in your yard, right now, there's a patch of ground you've already given up on. Too shady. Nothing good will grow there. So you've crammed every vegetable you own into the one sunny strip you've got, and quietly written off the shady side as a lost cause. Here's the problem with that. In a university trial in Hawaii, researchers took a popular salad lettuce and grew it two ways, one batch in full blazing sun, the other under 30% shade. The full sun plants produced about 8,100 kilos per hectare. The shaded ones produced over 13,600. The shade didn't hurt that crop, it pushed the yield up by almost 70%. So let's kill the biggest myth in vegetable gardening right now. Shade is not automatically the enemy. For some crops, it's a secret weapon. But, and this is the whole reason for this video, almost everybody gets shade vegetables wrong, and they get it wrong in the same few predictable ways. There's a mistake people make before they plant a single seed. There's a group of vegetables that quietly thrive in shade that most folks never even try. And there are a few you should honestly never waste your shady bed on. So stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll be able to look at that useless, shady corner and know exactly what it's good for and what it'll never do, no matter how hard you try. Let's back up, because you've been told one thing your whole gardening life. Every seed packet, every extension guide, every neighbor with a green thumb says the same thing. Vegetables need full sun, 6 to 10 hours of it. And that's not wrong for the right crops. Plants run on light. The technical version is that they're driven by something called photosynthetically active radiation. Basically, the slice of sunlight they actually use to build sugar and grow. More usable light, more fuel. That's just physics. But here's where the dogma falls apart. We don't all garden on open farmland anymore. Yards are smaller, cities are denser. People are growing food on balconies, between buildings, under trees, in the narrow gap beside the fence. For a huge number of gardeners today, full sun simply isn't an option. And the advice, just plant it in full sun, is completely useless when you don't have full sun to give. So the real question was never, is shade bad? The real question is, which vegetables work in shade, how much shade can they take, and what are the mistakes turning your shady bed into a graveyard? And it turns out the very first mistake happens before you've even picked up a trowel, because most gardeners can't actually see their own shade correctly. Let me show you what I mean. Here's the single most common mistake in shade gardening, and it's sneaky because it feels like you're being careful. You walk out to your garden, you look at a spot, and you go, yeah, that gets decent light. And you're almost always wrong. Why? Because your eyes are liars. The human eye automatically adjusts to low light. It's an amazing feature for walking around at dusk, and a terrible one for judging your garden. A spot that looks pretty sunny to you might be getting half the light a vegetable actually needs. But the bigger trap is time. Not time of day, time of year. Picture this. It's early spring. You're planting your garden. The big deciduous tree near your bed is still bare. The sun is sitting low in the sky, and light is pouring straight onto that soil. Looks perfect. So you plant there. Then summer arrives. That same tree leafs out into a thick green canopy. The sun climbs higher, and suddenly your full sun bed is sitting in deep shade for most of the day. You didn't move. The light did. And your plants are the ones paying for it. So how do the pros fix this? Two ways. The low-tech method, draw a simple map of your garden, and once an hour, from about 7 in the morning to 5 in the evening, mark down whether each spot is in sun or shade. Do it on a spring day and again in midsummer. Now you've got real data instead of a guess. The high-tech method is a quantum par meter, a little device that measures the exact usable light hitting a spot, so you're placing crops on science, not vibes. And while you're mapping, here's a pro move most people miss. You can actually steal more light. Painting a nearby wall white or laying down reflective mulch bounces indirect light back onto your plants. In a tight, shady yard, that little boost matters. Okay, so now you're committed to actually measuring your light instead of eyeballing it. Great, but that raises the obvious question. Once you know how much light a spot gets, what do those numbers even mean? How much is partial shade versus you're wasting your time? Let me give you the exact language the experts use. Here's the thing nobody explains clearly. Shade isn't one thing. There are actually several levels of it, and extension services define them by hours of direct sun per day. Once you know these, everything clicks into place. Full sun is 6 hours or more, ideally 8 to 10 for vegetables. That's your tomato territory. Partial sun is 4 to 6 hours, still pretty generous. Partial shade is the sweet spot for a lot of crops, roughly 2 to 4 hours of direct sun, or up to 6 if it's protected from the harsh afternoon. Then there's dappled or filtered shade, that beautiful shifting light that comes through an open tree canopy all day. Think of the light under a honey locust or a birch. Afternoon shade is a special and underrated one. Morning sun, then shielded from about 2 to 5 p.m. That means a much cooler microclimate during the hottest part of the day, and you'll see in a minute why that's almost magical for certain crops. And then you hit the danger zone. Full or bright shade is under 2 hours of direct sun, bright, but mostly indirect light. And deep or heavy shade is essentially zero direct sun, like under a dense evergreen or in a narrow gap between buildings. Be honest with yourself here. In true deep shade, vegetables are not going to happen. That's a fern spot, not a food spot. So now you can name your light. You know whether you've got partial shade, dappled shade, or that cool afternoon shade pocket. Which brings us to the part you actually came for. With that light, what can you genuinely grow? And the answer splits every vegetable into 4 very different groups. Every vegetable falls into one of 4 groups when it comes to shade. Get this right, and your shady bed feeds you. Get it wrong, and you'll spend all summer wondering why nothing's happening. Group 1. The crops that thrive in shade. These are your leafy greens, loose leaf lettuce, spinach, kale, arugula, Swiss chard, mustard greens. They're happy on just 2 to 4 hours of direct sun. And the reason is beautifully simple. You're eating the leaves. The leaf is the product. So the plant doesn't have to pour energy into flowering or fruiting, it just makes more leaf. In fact, in lower light, these plants often grow bigger, thinner, more tender leaves to catch what light there is. That's not a defect, that's lunch. Group 2. The crops that tolerate partial shade. These are your root vegetables, beets, carrots, radishes, turnips, plus the onion family, like leeks and chives. Give them 3 to 6 hours and they'll produce. Be realistic though. The roots will usually come out a bit smaller than a full sun crop because the plant has less energy to push down into the ground. The trade-off? Those roots often stay more tender and less woody, smaller but sweeter. Group 3. The crops that struggle. Bush beans, peas, and the heading brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. They'll limp along on 4 to 6 hours, but expect slow growth, smaller heads, and lighter harvests. Possible, but not exactly thriving. And Group 4. The crops that fail in heavy shade. No sugarcoating this one. Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, cucumbers, squash. These need 6 to 8 hours, full stop. Try to grow them in shade and you get thin, stretched out, leggy stems desperately reaching for light, flower buds that drop before they ever set fruit, and the few fruits you do get are low in sugar and ripen badly. This is the #1 heartbreak in shade gardening. And we'll come back to exactly why it happens. Now, here's the part that flips everything you think you know. Because for some of these shade-friendly crops, shade isn't just tolerated. It actually makes them better and more productive. And I'm not asking you to take my word for it. The data is genuinely surprising. Remember that Hawaii study from the start of the video? Let's finish the story because it's wild. Researchers tested vegetables under 5 different shade levels, and the heavy-feeding crops, eggplant, soybean, peanut, sweet potato, behaved exactly like you'd expect. The more shade you added, the more yield dropped, in a straight line down. But the leafy crops did the complete opposite. That semi-head lettuce climbed from about 8,100 kilos per hectare in full sun to 13,600 under 30% shade. Head cabbage jumped 23%, Chinese cabbage 21%. Under moderate shade, these crops didn't just survive, they outproduce the full sun plots. The takeaway from that research is that a lot of crops actually hit their best photosynthesis at around 2/3 of full sunlight, not blasting 100% sun. And it's not a one-off. Other trials on summer leafy greens found that certain crops stayed remarkably productive even under 75% shade, the kind of deep shade most people would never even attempt to plant in. But here's my favorite study, because it shows shade as a literal rescue mission. Utah State researchers grew bell peppers in brutal, intense sun. In the unshaded plots, 52% of the peppers got so badly sunburned they were unsellable. Over half the crop ruined. The peppers grown under a shade cloth, 0% sunburn. None. And in their tomato trials, adding shade increased leaf area by 40% and boosted marketable yield by nearly 50%, because shade slashed the cracking, the blossom end rot, and the deformed fruit that intense heat causes. Now, one honest counterpoint, so you trust me when shade hurts. A 2025 Cornell study looked at fall radishes grown in the shade of solar panels. The radishes responded to low light by throwing energy up into their leaves to grab more sun, which meant the actual root, the part you eat, came out smaller. So shade genuinely cost them yield. Their fix? Plant shaded root crops earlier in the season, before the light fades. So the real lesson isn't shade good or shade bad. It's that shade is a tool. Use it on the right crop, in the right climate, and it's a superpower. Use it on the wrong one, and it's a slow death. Which is exactly why the next part matters. Because even with the perfect crop, there are a handful of mistakes that quietly kill shade gardens, and you might be making them right now. So you've picked the right crop, and you've got the right light. Now here's how people still manage to kill it. 4 silent mistakes, and almost everyone makes at least one. Silent killer number 1, overwatering. This one's brutal because it comes from good intentions. You water your shady bed on the same schedule as your sunny beds. Seems logical, right? But shaded soil barely evaporates, and the plants transpire far less. So that soil stays wet way longer. Keep dumping water on it daily, and you drown the roots. The pore spaces fill with water. Oxygen gets cut off, the roots suffocate, and rot pathogens like Pythium and Phytophthora move in. The fix is dead simple. Ignore the calendar. Stick your finger a couple inches into the soil. Only water when it's actually dry down there. Now the flip side, silent killer number 2, tree root competition. If your shade comes from a big, mature tree, you've got the opposite problem. Those established tree roots are incredibly good at sucking up every drop of water, leaving your vegetables parched, even when you're watering. The fix is to physically separate them. Grow in raised beds lined with a root barrier fabric, or just grow in containers. Silent killer number 3, and this one's counterintuitive, fertilizer. When a shaded plant grows slowly, the instinct is to feed it more nitrogen to pep it up. Do not do this. Here's why. And it doubles as a myth worth busting. Fertilizer is minerals, not energy. It cannot replace sunlight. In low light, the plant can't even process all that nitrogen. So instead of healthy growth, you get weak, stretched, leggy stems, a buildup of nitrates in the leaves, and suppressed roots. You literally make the plant more fragile. The fix: go low and slow. Mature compost, well-rotted manure, or a gentle, balanced organic feed, something like a 5-4-5 that matches the plant's slower pace. And silent killer number 4, crowding. Shade plus moisture plus still air is paradise for fungal disease, powdery mildew, downy mildew. When you pack plants in tight, you trap humid, stagnant air around the leaves, and those spores explode. So in a shade bed, do the opposite of what the seed packet says. Space your plants wider than recommended. That airflow dries the leaves faster and starves the fungus. Prune off the lowest leaves, keep the ground weed-free, and you've cut your disease risk dramatically. Quick bonus tip, because I see this constantly. Don't panic at the little nodules on your bean and pea roots and assume it's disease. Those bumps are nitrogen-fixing nodules. They're a good thing. People mistake them for pest damage and reach for chemicals they never needed. So that's how to keep a shade garden alive. But I promised you shade could do more than just not kill your plants. It can actively make them better. Let me show you the hidden upsides. Here's the part nobody tells you. The actual perks of growing in shade that full sun gardeners never get. Upside 1. Your food tastes better. This is real. When leafy greens get hammered by direct sun and heat, they fight back by producing bitter compounds and tough, fibrous leaves. It's a defense mechanism. Grow those same greens under moderate shade, around a 30 to 45% reduction in light, and the plant never triggers that defense. The result is leaves that stay tender, succulent, and noticeably sweeter. Shade-grown lettuce and spinach can genuinely taste better than the sun-stressed stuff. Upside 2. Your greens last longer before bolting. Bolting is when a plant suddenly shoots up a flower stalk and turns bitter and useless, the bane of every salad gardener's summer. Now here's the nuance most people get wrong. Bolting is mainly triggered by changes in day length, but it gets accelerated hard by heat. So while shade won't stop the calendar, it absolutely keeps that soil and root zone cooler, and that cooler zone delays bolting in lettuce, spinach, bok choy, and mustard greens. That can buy you weeks of extra harvest, while your neighbor's greens have already gone to seed. Upside 3. Shade is heat wave armor. A shade structure doesn't just cut light, it changes the whole microclimate underneath it. It raises the humidity a little, drops the wind speed, and slows evaporation. So during a punishing summer heat wave, your shaded crops hold their moisture and cruise through on less water than your exposed beds. In a hot, dry summer, that's the difference between a garden that survives and one that crisps. So shade can make your food sweeter, your harvest longer, and your garden tougher. But whether shade is your best friend or your worst enemy comes down to one final factor. And it's the one most grow in shade videos completely ignore. Where you live changes everything. This is the make or break detail. The exact same shady bed is a blessing in one part of the country and a curse in another. Here's how it breaks down. If you're up in the Northeast or the Midwest, where summers are cool and the growing season is short, shade is mostly working against you. Your spring soil already warms up slowly, and a shaded bed stays cold and wet even longer, which delays germination and stunts your early growth. Up here, you want to chase every hour of sun you can get, and only use shade strategically, like throwing shade cloth over your lettuce during a brief midsummer heat spike to stop it bolting. Now, flip to the Southeast. Long, hot, brutally humid summers with intense sun. Down here, afternoon shade is a gift. University of Florida trials show that a 30 to 45% shade cloth lets growers produce peppers, leafy greens, and herbs through the heat that would otherwise fry in full exposure. The catch is that southern humidity supercharges disease, so this is where that wide spacing and those disease-resistant varieties become non-negotiable. In the Southwest, think arid heat, regular days over 105 degrees. Afternoon shade isn't a nice-to-have, it's survival. University of Arizona Extension points out that even classic full-sun crops often need partial or dappled shade just to make it through summer. A shade structure out there can drop fruit temperature by more than 20 degrees, which is enough to stop sunburn and prevent the flower drop that wrecks beans and peppers in extreme heat. Out in the Pacific Northwest, with all those overcast skies and cool springs, shade is a limiter again. So you lean on fast-maturing, cold-tolerant greens and roots, and use raised beds to warm that soil up faster. And California is basically a country of its own. On the cool coast, you need full sun to get a decent yield, but in the hot inland valleys, afternoon shade is what saves your greens from heat stress and bolting. So before you copy anyone's shade advice, including mine, ask where they garden. The right move in Phoenix is the wrong move in Maine. So let's bring it home. Shade isn't the enemy you are taught to fear. That gloomy corner of your yard can grow sweeter, more tender greens than your sunny bed ever will. As long as you measure your light honestly, match the right crop to it, dodge the overwatering and over-fertilizing traps, and respect what your region is actually doing to that bed. But here's the thing. Knowing what grows in shade is only half the game, because even the perfect shade-loving crop will fail if you put it in the ground at the wrong moment. Shaded soil warms late in spring, and the light fades fast in fall, so your planting calendar has to shift to match. Get the timing wrong, and none of this works. That's exactly what I break down in the video popping up on your screen right now, the seasonal planting schedule for shade gardens, so you know precisely when to start, transplant, and harvest to get the biggest possible yield out of low light.
Go ahead and tap it. It's the natural next step, and I'll see you over there.